Good morning, my name is Greg, and welcome to the very first video in a series of videos beginning programming in the wonderful language called Self. If you're a beginning programmer or new to object-oriented programming or really just want to get a deep understanding of this wonderful language, I definitely am able to take a few minutes of coding and drag it out into 20 minutes. Let's start off with a basic overview of Self. First, I've opened Self Control and I'm choosing a snapshot. And a snapshot, it's a little different than like say in C or some other language where you type a bunch of stuff in a text editor and run it and then you just save that text and run it again sometime. Self is happening live while you program. What you do is you basically, it's like pausing a video game and it's like a snapshot of where you're at, and then you name it and then you can come back to it. So let's just start, we'll open up Morphic. So when they invented this program, David Unger and Randy Smith, it was really new and different, and it really still is different, and they really designed it so that your brain, like the basic part of your brain, could really understand it. They had to do a lot of fancy stuff, new kinds of programming to make it work back on those older computers, way back in 1986. I guess the world just wasn't ready for it. The cool main concept never got embraced, but a ton of the stuff they did actually got put into JavaScript. Papers written about the wonderful programming innovations that happen with Self, but it didn't just start collecting a ton of people working on it and a ton of money in it. So that's why there's this programming language for the future, for the common man, and yet like sitting on the screen is a garbage can that looks like Super Mario almost got hit by it when Donkey Kong threw it at him in like 1985. So the first real thing you see up here is this collapsed outliner called a shell. And so this shell is the name of a particular object in Self, and it's the one that is kind of like the quick, easy interface toolkit for programmers. When it's expanded like this is called an outliner, and an outliner is just a drawing of like what a mental concept of an object should look like, which is a chunk of code with slots, and the slots could be some data like variables or constants, some functions that we call methods in object-oriented programming language. And if you don't understand object-oriented programming language, don't worry about it, because after you see how to do all this, then that'll be it. You'll know it. So objects are these sets of slots. Here we've zoomed in, and a slot is a pointer to another object, which could be a variable or a method or very likely a whole nother group of slots. If the name on the slot doesn't have an asterisk, then it's pointing to an object that's just for this object, the object that's represented by the outliner. If it has an asterisk in the name like these two, that means that these slots are pointing to a shared object, or more likely a shared group of objects that we call trait. And these traits actually replace the class system, which I'll explain soon. And then each slot you can kind of pop out here. When you expand a slot fully, it's an outliner. Here we are in the shell, and if I press this E button here, that's the evaluator, and it's called an evaluator because whatever you type in, the computer just evaluates it on the spot and it makes it happen. What I'm going to do first is I'm going to type in lobby. Lobby is kind of the top of the hierarchy of objects in the Self language. So if we press get it, and there's lobby, and pop it down, shell lives right here in lobby, and each slot opens up, like here we'll do traits, it opens up, and there's a bunch more. You can create these little categories to put your slots in just for organization. And these can pop out and so on. So there's this giant pyramid of objects. And the reason I'm showing you this is it is a fathomable program. You can look around in here and explore and kind of get the idea of how everything works together, and then you could change it. Like the language Smalltalk, which you probably already have bumped into Smalltalk, or you probably wouldn't have found Self. Everything is an object. Even the number 1 is an object, the color blue is an object, and then Self is even more just objects than Smalltalk, because Self doesn't use classes. The main point of an object-oriented programming language is that there's built-in ways to make copies of objects, as many as you need while the program's running, and then also to vary objects and create a new object that's kind of like an old object but has some new things. Usually you use something called a class to do that, and if you don't understand classes, don't worry, you don't have to understand them, because Self doesn't use them. The two guys that invented Self thought they were just too weird. He liked the idea that the mind would just have to know about one thing, an object. So they created actually a really slick way to not use classes that actually allows you to do a lot more flexible things, and I think it's easier to understand. We're gonna check that out and see how to do that right now. So we're gonna type in open and close brackets here like that, and that tells Self, hey, make an empty object and make an empty outliner out of it. So we press get it, just like we did in the lobby, there it is. We pump it in, it says no filled out slots. You add a slot and we'll add something, and I'm gonna magically create all this and show it to you. And we'll do that in the second part of this video.